What's up, wrestling fans, trading card collectors? Welcome to another episode of Wrestling with Cards. Today we've, believe it or not, got an Emmy award-winning guest. And no, it's not that one idiot that was on here that one time. You guys really think wrestling cards are worth anything? That guy will never work in this town again. We've got Shane Norton on the show today from the Sports Card Nobody podcast. And you may be asking, if he's a nobody, how's he an Emmy award winner? Or could he actually be a Dundee Award winner?
All right, joke landed. So we are here. Thank you all for coming to the Dundee Awards.
Shane is definitely not a nobody in the hobby. Shane's podcast is great. Top-notch audio quality, I might add. I may say this in this interview. But we talked to him about how he got into wrestling cards, how he talks about wrestling cards on his platform, some other hobby talk, market talk, WWE Prizm, and much more that I hope will help you guys. But before we jump into that conversation, we've got to get those plugs out of the way. A few reminders of how you can help show your support for my content. It's easy, it's free, you're already here. Hit that subscribe button, it doesn't cost a thing. And if you like this video so far, if you like my other videos, and maybe you've already subscribed, give me a like. And make sure to share this video or any of my other videos with wrestling fans, people in the hobby, sports card collectors, Pokemon collectors, wrestling fans that don't collect. Anybody, we're just trying to grow the audience and get more people on the channel. Make sure to check out the Worlds Collide podcast. Myself, Tony Vella from WrestlingTradingCards.com. We get together each week to talk about all things wrestling cards, so you won't want to miss that. It's available on all popular podcast platforms. Please subscribe to that and never miss a show. If you would like to help contribute monetarily to the content that I put out, check out Wrestling with Cards on Patreon, where for as little as $1 a month, you can have your name in the credits of these videos. There's other higher tiers. You can get access to bonus videos. You can get access to, they call it the booking committee, where you can kind of come on the show every quarter and have your opinion heard as far as like steering the direction of the content, and you never know what's going to happen. There's also links below to my eBay store, as well as all my social accounts, and links below if you want to buy me a coffee. This is another one of those episodes where I don't have a coffee. However, I do have Bang. I believe this is Radical Skedaddle Skittles. But let's jump into the conversation with Shane Norton, Dundee Award-winning Shane Norton.
Oh, yeah.
Shut it.
From the Sports Card Nobody podcast. Shane Norton, Sports Card Nobody, which is not exactly true. You are not a nobody. Emmy Award winner, as a matter of fact. But the big question is, are you a Dundee Award winner?
Oh, dude, that is phenomenal. That just blows the Emmy out of the water. Are you kidding me? That's incredible.
Gotta love the Dundies. We should start giving those away to guests on here for something. I don't know what yet, but something.
Oh man, anytime you're going to throw some Office references at me, I'm on board big time.
It's the best. I wish we had more Office related stuff in the hobby. They've got an Uno set out there, and Leaf has got some kind of sporadic autographs, and there's some custom cards. But man, could you imagine like autographed parallels and shiny different kinds of Office cards? It would be amazing.
100%, dude. Some of the customs where they have the LeBron, Dwayne Wade, but instead it's Michael Scott and Dwight with the arms out. Oh, it's so good. I really want to get my hands on one of those.
Hey, you never know. With Fanatics taking over, we might end up getting something like that. That might be fun.
100%. It could end up in their zero cool thing, right?
Yeah. Especially, I think that if you, man, just a lot of, we're completely starting the show off topic talking, but yeah, there's so much zero cool effect within the Office that I think could really take off. But anyway, just give anybody a quick introduction of yourself. Don't want to give away too much background stuff as we get into some of these topics, because I want people to go listen to your podcast. So let everybody know what you do.
I appreciate that, man. So yeah, my name is Shane Norton. I call myself the Sports Card Nobody. And, the reason I do that is I really am into this hobby big time. I love collecting sports cards, wrestling cards, Marvel cards, really whatever strikes my fancy. If they start making Office cards, I'm gonna be all in on that as well. But I call myself the Sports Card Nobody because, when I first started collecting and watching just nonstop content and really engaging in that way, I would see so many people at the National making like massive $20,000 trades or picking up these $50,000 cards, and dawned on me pretty quickly, as much as I love some of this content, still watch it anyway, it's not really the lane that I think I'm ever going to end up in. So I started to want to hear more from folks like me that weren't necessarily at that level, and I couldn't find any at the time. So I started making the content, started with the YouTube stuff, and then transition over to the podcast. But huge card collector, huge collector in general. I love comics. I love hot toys. I talk about that a lot on my pod as well. And big sports fan. I love the LA sports teams. I'm a Dodgers fan, Lakers fan, LA Kings fan, although hockey's a little bit lower for me, and a big 49ers fan, the only non-LA team I love. So yeah, it's a quick rundown of who I am, I suppose.
Make sure to check out the podcast. We're going to definitely plug that as much as we can on here, and links to social media and the podcast, all that will be in the show notes of this. So when you're done watching, make sure to check it out. How did you get into wrestling cards? Let's start right there, because I think I'm trying to get on more people that aren't within that little wrestling card bubble that have been collecting for 20 years. And we're seeing a lot more people come into it. I saw you start talking about it, as I think your show, you start talking with sports cards and a little bit of wrestling, but through your content, I'm starting to see the passion for wrestling cards kind of shining through you and others that are out there putting content. So at what point did you actually start putting money down for wrestling cards?
Yeah. So that's actually I'm really glad you brought that up, because, to quickly plug all the amazing things that you've been doing in content creation. One of the things you and Tony Vella have talked about a lot is how the wrestling community is full of wrestling fans that don't collect wrestling cards. And I 100% fell right into that lane for so long. I've loved wrestling since I was a kid. I mean, I talk about this a lot on my content as well. The Hulkamania years, and especially the late 90s, the NWO era headed into the Attitude Era was like, I mean, that defined a lot of who I was, and maybe shaped who I am today, which might not be the best thing. But,
No, yeah, I get that.
Yeah. So just a lifelong passion for the wrestling industry and for the business. But when I got back into cards, there's nothing original here. I collected when I was a kid. I stopped, and I got back into it in 2019, just before the huge boom, actually.
Sure.
And it started because of, long story, relatively short. I was going to get married. My wife and I were getting married, and I was going to get her some tickets, and I decided tickets to a Green Bay Packers game. And I thought the morning of my wedding, how cool would it be to present those tickets, but with some football cards? So I went over like a local a Walmart or Target, whatever, and bought a bunch of packs, just ripping until I found a Aaron Rodgers card to put with the tickets.
Okay.
So whatever. So it reignited my passion for cards. I then started buying football and baseball and really falling into it. And it wasn't until about, maybe 6 months ago now that it dawned on me that there really is a massive wrestling card market as well. There's so much gorgeous stuff to buy. And it may have been because of Stacking Slabs. It may have been because of Brett McGrath's podcast that I got the idea in my head that I really got to get my hands on a Bret Hart card. I am such a huge Bret Hart mark. I have been my entire life. I've got my Sandy Koufax cards. I've got my Dodgers cards and fantasy football cards and all these things that I've bought, but I don't have a Bret Hart card. I mean, that's ridiculous. He's like one of the most important entertainment figures and sports figures in my life. So I had to go out and get one. That led me down the path of looking up the rookie cards, the 1987 Wrestling Stars set that he's in. Finally found one that I thought was in good enough condition, pulled the trigger on it, and it just seemed to open up the dam, right? The seawall came down and the water just came rushing, because then it was, okay, well, what else can I get? I want to start looking at some autograph stuff. I want to start looking at all different things. And then the Transcendent set was coming out. And that was when I started to really realize how high end the stuff can be. And I got my right next to me, it's the number to 15 Bret Hart green autograph card. And once I got that in hand, I realized, these are as amazing as any other card I've been collecting. I just didn't realize it. So then at that point, I had started to reach out to different people, asking, advice on wrestling cards and, what the community was like. And little by little, I started to really interact with a lot of other folks. I found your show, especially the Worlds Collide was the first one that I found. And I got to listen to this. This is incredible. This is just wrestling specific. As much as I love Stacking Slabs, this is helping me understand better about this market that I didn't know anything about. And then what really kicked it off. So I've talked about this on my pod a couple of weeks back, but I actually lost a bet to a couple of buddies, and I had to buy them some $20 cards. And the bet revolved around whether or not my sister-in-law could name 10 or more wrestlers. Whatever. I have no idea why it even started, but that was the bet. And I lost. My sister-in-law named way more. I took the under for whatever reason. So I had to buy them some $20 cards, and I ended up at a card shop near me, Ideal Sports Cards, a fantastic sports card shop for anybody who's in Connecticut. And he had some really great wrestling cards, including a Seth Rollins numbered to 99 autograph from the 2020 Finest set. I forget the price that I paid, but it was like a little over $20. But in my opinion, it was totally worth it to settle this.
So
bet.
Cheap.
Yeah. I mean, especially even just that was a couple months ago now. I mean, it's changed in just a short few months already. So it was kind of a no-brainer. I knew my buddy would love it, got it for him. And I took a picture of it and immediately got jealous. Oh man, this card is going to my buddy and not me, but this card is fantastic. He's going to love this. And sure enough, he did, whatever. So then I go to a card show at Mohegan Sun here in Connecticut a couple of weeks back. I went to the same dealer who I had bought from at the shop. He was there. And I knew I had to set up a bet with another friend who was in that same situation. And I said, hey, what other wrestling cards you got? He broke out a whole bunch of the 2020 Finest golds. And it was I was like, okay, for sure, I'm going to buy every one of these. It was The Rock, it was Stone Cold, Triple H, Undertaker. And I think there was a fifth one in there that's escaping me right now, but I just bought them all. I was like, and the Bret Hart, obviously. And the Bret Hart was in there. So I was like, this is definitely, I'm going to buy them all. And I'll let my other buddy pick between the Undertaker and the Triple H, because those are his guys. And they were all like around $20 each. So I bought the entire lot. And when I got home with them, again, I was thrilled that I had these cards, and then still jealous that my buddy was getting one of them. And that was it. I really started to want to collect this Finest set. I just loved the way these things looked in gold. And then I started opening up to anything numbered 50 or less. And it just became my newest addiction in the card market.
So what do you think it is for you personally, as somebody that isn't, again, somebody that's not within that wrestling card bubble per se? A lot of us, and I say us because, I've been collecting off and on for years, but a lot of people will go to, the stuff from the mid 90s, the late 90s, like Comic Images stuff, maybe the Fleer 2002 Royal Rumble set that's got the big 4 rookies in it, the 82, 83 All-Stars, some of the 70s stuff. Like, it seems like a lot of people are gravitated to that kind of stuff. But we're seeing this new crop of collectors come in that are going after just what you said, the shiny stuff like Finest and Chrome, and then the higher end stuff like Transcendent. In your opinion, what is it about those two types of cards that are bringing different types of collectors in?
Well, I think part of it might actually stop being true, but part of it is that they're more affordable. It for me, once I realized like the amount of cards I was able to buy at a really reasonable price compared to the other major sports. I mean, good luck buying a single LaMelo Ball gold shiny card versus the entire lot of 5 cards I bought of major stars. I mean, we're talking The Rock, we're talking Bret Hart, we're talking some of the biggest wrestlers of all time versus, and I'm not knocking LaMelo Ball and I'm not knocking, prospecting or whatever you want to call it, but a rookie who hasn't proven anything. I mean, so I think the affordability is a big reason, but we are seeing this market go up and up and up pretty quickly. So we'll see how long that is or how long that holds. But beyond that, honestly, I think this is just from a personal standpoint. I think it has to do with education. I think it has to do with folks like you, folks like Brett McGrath, folks like, at Drake's PC, who's made such big splashes in this hobby, opening people's eyes to realizing that there is more to collect that is modern and shiny and low numbered, just like all the other big sports that we all, most of us in this hobby collect, it definitely parallels a lot closer than I ever realized. So once it hit me, that the market actually existed. And then once I got the cards in hand, I was done.
Yeah. Yeah. Seeing them in person, like what you said at the show, you saw them and you were just like, I've got to own them all. I think maybe I've had some other people on before that have talked like, it seems like it's maybe an easier thing to understand because certain parallels, certain colors, and certain rarities within sports cards, and kind of bringing that over, which is really going to work with Prizm. By the time this airs, Prizm will be out. But I think it's going to be an easy transition from other people I've talked to, whereas it's actually reverse of a lot of the traditional wrestling card collectors don't understand a lot of that aspect, and they understand like rarity when it comes to like grades, or when it comes to misprints, years of produce, like the 1990 classic, where there's the 1990 set, but there's also an 89 like year on the back of it. And just that differentiation, like the wrestling card diehards know that, but they don't understand why Panini's got to have like 40 different parallels, and which parallel is, more valuable or sought after than another, and why like most of the people who are into Prizm value low numbered rare Prizm over sticker autos or autographs in general, which are loaded in Prizm. It's interesting to see the two different worlds coming together. And like I said, this will be out after Prizm comes out, but it's going to be interesting to see what Prizm does to the entire wrestling card community.
I mean, the hype on that is real, right?
Yeah.
So Prizm is, it feels like that's about to be a milestone shift in the segment of the hobby. As somebody who's relatively newer to this too, I'm maybe 6 months, I would call it, really getting into wrestling, and maybe 3 or 4 months where I've gotten deeper into it. But quickly, it's obvious that Prizm is going to have, it's going to shake up the whole thing. And there's so much information out there that's fascinating. Gelman on Twitter, right? SC Sports Cards Uncensored, just the blog that I think he runs. He's been all over the place lately on podcasts and whatnot. Everybody's trying to pick everyone's brain because people are really trying to understand this. It's interesting how you've got the wrestling community who as a whole doesn't understand the Prizm world, but then you've got that world that doesn't understand the wrestling world. Cause I was just in a Facebook group recently where it's more, traditional sports related. And somebody posted the price of the Prizm box with the Dutch auction that's starting at 2,000. Immediately, it was just people just like, this makes no sense. What a waste of money. I feel bad for anybody who spends this kind of money, this, that, and the other. It's obvious that they don't understand that the wrestling market is real and growing, while most of the sports card world has been regressing. After the big, huge boom, basketball regressed hard. They all did. They all regressed. But meanwhile, wrestling is seeing all-time high sales in so many different cards. Big Rock cards, big Roman cards. It's happening all the time. This Prizm set is coming at the exact right time. And I'm excited for it. I pre-ordered a box. Like you said, when this comes out, I don't know when the boxes will actually ship or whatever. I got swept up in it. And I said to myself, I got to get my hands on at least one box, and we'll figure out what I do with it from there.
I think even, buying one box and sitting on it, give it a year, you're going to easily double your money, if not more. So if you rip, you never know what you could find. And if you hold, it's like a automatic win, no matter what way you look at it. So
I agree with, I do think I will hold it. I am not in this hobby for flipping. I'm in this hobby because I have an addiction to collecting things, and I love collecting things that I'm passionate about. But I do think that this is going to be a box I hold on to because there's no way I'm going to pull the whatever version of the Rock. Brett McGrath's podcast they announced that there is going to be the Rock in it. I'm probably not going to pull that card. So I think I'm going to sell the box so I can buy whatever other cards I want specifically. But yeah, I'm excited to get it either way.
So let's talk about the focus of your collecting and kind of what that entails, because you said you're all over the place. And for a lot of people that can be a hindrance. Like, you get too much stuff going and you can't, you've got $50 here, $100 here, $1,000 here. And next thing you know, you can't actually get a giant card you wanted because it's so spread out. What would you say right now is the focus on your collecting? And I guess, how do you balance such a variety? And what advice would you have for people who are so like spread thin, I guess you could say, like you are?
Yeah, that is a tremendous question, because you hear a lot of advice being to try to focus, to try to cut out the noise and focus on specific things. Things that check certain boxes or whatever it might be. I still do that to an extent. And my sort of scatterbrainness to my hobbies is kind of a focused lostness or wandering. So right now the focus is really this 2020 Finest wrestling set. Mm-hmm. For the most part, that's all my eBay searches. I'm trying to get all of the wrestlers that are important to me or important to the industry. Because I talk about this a lot. I'm an AEW guy. It's kind of the show that I watch every week, but I still love the WWE. I still respect it. I pay so much attention to it. But there's still a lot of wrestlers that they have that I don't exactly have the attachment to that I do, like the Bret Harts or an Adam Hangman Page over in AEW. But I still respect how important they are to the industry. And so those are the guys that I've been collecting and after, and the rules for me is 250 or less on that, autographed or non-auto. So that's my focus right now. But the way that it works for me is it kind of depends on what my like favorite thing in the moment is. So when I first got back into the hobby, I bought the cards for my wedding day present, like I mentioned, but really what grabbed me was, I play fantasy football and I had a couple of years where I was winning like 3 straight years, I think at this point in my league with all my friends, and we're really into it. I decided I wanted to try to pick up the MVPs of each of my years in football cards. So that was the focus then. Yeah. Right. That was something that these cards meant something to me, even if the players aren't on my favorite team. These were guys that helped me win this, this silly little fantasy football.
That's something too. Like I always talk about telling the stories behind the cards. That's something that, like, it doesn't matter the value. It doesn't matter. Like you probably like 10, 20 years down the road, you're going to look at those cards and remember why you have them.
100%. And, there's talk. One of the cards is a Christian McCaffrey, and there's talk that he might get traded, whatever. And there's talk that, if he gets traded, the prices might go through the roof. I don't care if it goes through the roof. I've got this pretty awesome card from that, represents a year that I want to, get to brag to my friends again, Right. So that's what that card means to me. And then that kind of transition. I definitely got scatterbrained for a while, but then in 2020 was a big year where I dove in heavy. I don't exactly know why, but for some reason I decided that was the year I was going to start collecting Clayton Kershaw cards. Huge Dodgers fan. So I was trying to chase his rainbow in the 2020 Topps Chrome set. The Superfractor ended up selling, so I knew I couldn't complete the rainbow, but then the Dodgers ended up winning the World Series in 2020. So I started to chase all of the as low numbered cards of the different Dodgers that were important in that World Series. And I've got a shelf above me here that has like 6 or 7 of those cards. And again, all those cards mean something to me beyond just collecting cards, right? That was the focus for that, however many months that I chased those cards. And then I got a little scatterbrained and it was kind of floating from there until I really hit this wrestling set, because I started to learn much more about grading. I started to fall down like grading rabbit holes and trying to learn more about that. But really, you asked this question as you led into this, though, about advice. The best advice I can give, especially if you do tend to float like I do, is you got to make sure everything else is handled first. Like you hear lots of jokes about people who are like, my wife doesn't know how much I'm spending on this, or, I got to hide that. That's definitely not the path I take. My wife knows what I'm doing. My wife is well aware of my hobbies, and we talk about it, and she's as on board as she can be. It's definitely not her thing, but she respects that I love it. So, but all that is, I handle everything else, right? The bills are paid. If we have other things we need to do, if I have to stop buying cards for a while, I do it. I'm at least able to remain disciplined like that. As much as I joke that like it's an addiction and it's an obsession, I can still manage the fact that I have 2 kids. I've got things that I got to take care of. I've got to, put the food on the table and all those sorts of things first, so that this really is just how I'm spending my entertainment money, the money that I used to spend when I didn't have kids to go out to the comedy clubs or to the bars or whatever. That's kind of the best advice I can give, right? Don't let your hobbies overtake your responsibilities, especially if you can be flighty like I am.
It's interesting too. You said entertainment money, like to stop and think that your entertainment money is all of a sudden turning into money that, it is entertainment, but it can also make you money. It turns like the hobby, like turns into a business, whether you want it to or not. Like people are out there that say, I'm not a flipper, I don't sell stuff. But if the opportunity came, your entertainment money that you just spent on something, 15 years ago, all of a sudden, could that make you a down payment on a house? Could it buy you a house? It's an interesting way to look at it for sure.
Yeah. And I'm one of those people that, I mentioned earlier, I'm in this because I collect, I'm in it for the passion, but I'm not naive. I understand that this is something that I can flip if I have to, or if I want to, right? People talk about it all the time. They buy cards and then they consolidate to get a bigger card, or they realize that this card didn't check all the boxes, so they sell that to get others. And I in fact just did that. I bought an Alexa Bliss Topps Heritage Auto of like numbered to 199, I think it was. I got it for under $100. I think I bought it for 80 and change, I think, shipping or whatever. realized that this Topps Finest was really what I'm after. And even though I love this Bliss card, it doesn't fit with what I'm trying to do.
Yeah.
I was able to turn around and flip it for $150, right? Not a
Perfect.
bad profit for just a little bit of time, but that money is going back in the Topps Finest collection I want to add to. I loved that card. That card was awesome, but it just didn't fit. And in fact, I'm still chasing the Bliss from this 2020 set. That Alexa Bliss card is better than the Topps Finest one, but it just doesn't fit that set for me. So I figured it just doesn't make sense to hang on to that card. Why not take that little bit of profit and see what happens? So yeah, I mean, this absolutely turns into something that I can go out to the bar and, spend $100 at the bar. That's it. That money's gone forever.
Right.
Yes, I spend $100. I might be able to turn it into 150 if I have to or want to later down the road.
Is there anything that you've done like that, whether it's trying to get into too many lanes, as you said, or buying something, realizing it doesn't fit what you're doing to sell it? What's something that you maybe have made a mistake on that you're like, okay, like all these other things have seemed to work, but this is something that just does not work for me? What is something you could say to the viewers that just some advice of something to not do?
Well, I don't want to bash too much with what I'm about to say, but this is the first thing that comes to mind when you ask that question. Is when I was going down the trying to figure out what to grade and how to get my cards graded and where to do it and everything. I chose to send in I forget how many cards now, 5 or 6 cards. And I've talked about it and shared it on my Instagram, but I decided the first company I was going to grade with was HGA. I don't know if that's going to work out for me as well as I had hoped, because some of those cards were cards that I had pulled myself that don't fit my collection, such as I have a Vlad Guerrero Jr. Prizm card and a Fernando Tatis refractor card. Both those in a PSA slab are around, it fluctuates, but call it $400 to $500.
Sure.
In the HGA slabs, it's nowhere near it. So since I'm not necessarily like wanting to keep those cards from my personal collection, I wish that I had not necessarily gone down that route for grading, since I do intend to possibly sell them for other cards that I want. I think HGA makes great slabs. I really think they're gorgeous. I think that the way they feel in the hand is phenomenal. But being that the company is so new, if it's something you intend to try to sell, I probably wouldn't recommend that at this time. I'm rooting for them, but it just doesn't seem to make sense if you want to sell. Beyond that, one other thing I did a little while back with the 2021 Topps Chrome. I don't know that I regret this yet, because I did this for a long-term potential play, but I actually bought a case of 2021 Topps Chrome baseball with the intention of trying to sell enough of them that I would end up with several boxes paid off, right? I would pay off the whole thing. And then, oh, great. I get to keep 2 of these boxes for myself.
Sure.
And I wasn't sure how I was going to do it even when I did it. I was kind of making it up as I went along, hoping to possibly do breaks with them, because I think breaks are fun. But trying to find enough interest for that particular set has been tough. I mean, the rookie class hasn't been through the roof, but there's a lot of questions about that. So we'll see. I did well with like the first 4 or 5 boxes out of it, but I'm not quite to the break even point, and I still have like 7 boxes left or whatever it is. But again, I didn't necessarily do that to knowing or thinking it would happen right away. I thought it might take a year or 2.
More long-term thing. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So I'm not there yet that I regret it, but it has been tough when I've been in different groups and trying to find interest and realizing there's not as much interest as I thought there would be. All right. Or even when I first got them, I had a bunch of interest from friends who were like, yeah, let's get in on that. But it kind of waned off kind of quickly. But I don't feel like I'm stuck with them yet. Maybe 5 years from now, if nothing changes.
I don't think you're going to lose anything. I mean, I've never lost anything on sealed wax ever. I think there's this kind of, I don't know if it's misinformation or misconception that, hey, I can, this isn't 2020. You can't just, in general, you can't go buy a blaster and just flip it the same day. You could probably do that over the course of a month or 2 or a year or 5 years or whatever. I mean, you not only would you flip it, maybe you 5X your money, maybe you just break even on it. But I don't think there's ever going to be a losing proposition with buying sealed stuff.
Yeah, that was kind of why I did it. I had been listening to a ton of different content, really trying to educate myself. And I don't even remember where it was that the idea like truly sunk in that I should give it a shot. Again, I could afford it. It wasn't something that I was putting anything, like overstretching myself to make the the investment, if you I guess that is what it is,
Yeah.
to make the investment on it. And I really did truly believe is that no matter what happens, I think I'll be able to break even. And again, maybe get to keep 2 of these for myself. And I love collecting baseball cards. So how cool would that be? I never in my head thought this is going to 5X, 10X or anything like that. And again, I knew that it was going to be a longer term play, but since it's the first real long-term play that I've made, I'm still feeling it out to see, what'll happen down the road once the baseball season comes around, and maybe when this next baseball season ends, and seeing how the rookies from that class do. We'll see.
Yeah. I mean, look at some of the stuff that was going nuts, like first year Prizm boxes and boxes of certain releases, because maybe at the time they didn't do that well, but all of a sudden these rookies start emerging, or certain players parallels start emerging. And and we say down the road, I mean, that could be 6 months. It could be 6 years. Like we just don't know.
100%. I mean, even looking at when I first got back into the hobby in 2019, I pulled a bunch of stuff. I think I bought a couple of Topps Chrome hobby boxes. I don't remember exactly now, but like I said, I mean, I pulled a Vlad Guerrero Prizm. I pulled a Tatis refractor. Nobody knew that those cards were going to be potentially $500 cards graded, down the road. But when I do look back, like those boxes, I think sell from like 800 to 1,000. If I had kept those boxes sealed, I'd definitely make a profit. But we'll see if I do flip the cards that I don't want to keep out of it, where it shakes out, if it kind of reaches those boxes prices or whatever. But I mean, that was kind of one of the things I was looking back on at the time. I think when I first decided to do this, so the boxes were at about $1,000 a piece. So I think they've come down a little bit since then, but still in that, close to $1,000 a piece. So yeah, we'll see down the road.
It's just a paid lesson is kind of how I view stuff like that. Maybe you won, maybe you lost, maybe you broke even. Sure. Either way, I think activity, like that's the best way to learn, like just buying, selling, reading, trading, doing all kinds of stuff, making relationships with people. That's one of the biggest things that I've learned is not being afraid to spend money to understand the way things work, if that makes sense.
No, 100%. I mean, I completely agree with that, because it doesn't, this is true with almost anything in life. It doesn't matter how much reading, how much watching, how much listening and learning you do, until you're getting your hands dirty and you're really getting in there and you're really trying to get a feel for what it actually is, you can't really learn. Which
we're going to touch on that as we get into one of the segments here in a minute about content creation, but go ahead.
Yeah. Yeah, it was good. So like to expand on that, like one of the things I hadn't done was, you already touched on it a little bit, was start to open up, build relationships. So I had a podcast earlier in the year where I talked about how one of the things I look forward to in 2022 was starting to expand my hobby circle, my hobby network. And that's been huge. I mean, making friends with, becoming friendly with Alex, who runs Ideal Sports Cards, the Ideal Sports Card Shop, has been great. Meeting you, talking to Drake on Twitter, talking to Gelman on Twitter, talking to all these people. It has opened my mind up to so much more aspects of the hobby that there's just no way I could without starting to try to build those relationships. And thankfully, there's so many awesome people in this hobby that are receptive, that are willing to talk, that are willing to give advice. It makes the whole thing so much more fun than just hoarding cards nonstop.
Yeah. So we kind of touched on this a little bit, but I said I've seen it kind of come through on your content as well as others. What do you think it is more recently that has kind of, it could be the pricing, although the pricing, we're not where we are with wrestling, where sports cards are when you look at the grand scheme of things. But why do you think there's been like this, a little bit of recognition coming in? I won't call it a lot, because a lot of the popular podcast platforms still do not want to talk about, like, oh yeah, WWE Prizm's coming out. All right, let's talk about F1. I say that all the time. We're starting to see a little bit of recognition, and I still say there are so many wrestling fans out there that are closet wrestling fans. They grew up watching it. They don't want to admit that they are fans, but I'm wondering if, again, the Prizm release will kind of open the floodgates, as you said earlier, to wrestling cards from a mainstream perspective. Why do you think there's a little bit more interest on that? And do you see any of that happening going forward?
I mean, honestly, I think it's because of people like you. I honestly think that there's been, as far as I've been able to see, more and more content creators that are talking about this, because you're right. the big time podcasts or different content creators that I listen to or watch, they don't really touch on it. You're so right about it. And even when they do, it's very misinformed, I guess is the nicest way I'll put it.
I'll call it disrespectful.
Yeah, that might be fair. That might be fair. I do think it comes from a place of ignorance, though. I think that from some of the folks that I listen to, anyway, I think that there's a little bit of ignorance that when they talk about it, because just recently they were taught, there was I won't name any names, but they were talking about the Topps Finest was about to come out, the 2021. And it was very much, oh man, I don't know anything about this. I know some people have been asking about it in our groups or whatever, but yeah, I don't know. If you like it, go buy it. Meanwhile, missing that, like the 2020 product, it had like, I think is doubled in price of what its retail was. At the same time, I'm listening to this podcast, the price of the 2021 product started at 107, I think, for a hobby box. By the time that podcast came out, it was up to $150. Yeah. I mean, that's a pretty big rise in such a short amount of time. But you know, there's obviously a real fever to get these things. But because of folks like you and folks like Drake who making these big purchases, I think that has all started to really educate people like myself, as you guys have put it, the wrestling fans that don't collect wrestling cards. And then that has started to get money into that segment of the hobby that has got the interest. And once the money starts rolling, then it starts to become a real thing, right? Because then people who aren't paying attention don't have any choice but to pay attention. Oh my God, that is an expensive, that box that's going for $900 or $800, that Prizm box, people are actually buying it. This isn't just crazy. There's a real, like a grassroots movement, I guess, to kind of put it, with content creators like yourselves that have started to educate people like me. And I think it's just started to have an effect. It's the best guess that I have.
It's also really boring, in my opinion, when you're just hearing about the same stuff over and over. Like, I like to hear about stuff I either don't know about or don't care about because I'm learning. And it's interesting to hear, like, you know, I want to hear about sports cards, but I also want to hear about F1. I want to hear about golf. I want to hear about Magic the Gathering. I want to hear about Squishmallow cards. That's kind of a thing that's happened out of nowhere now. Like, I want to hear all of these things because maybe I'm like, oh yeah, I kind of like that. Maybe I should pick up a couple of cards. Or maybe I'm like, hey, I don't care, but I'm learning. I love hearing other people's opinions about that. That's one of my favorite things. Like, I love listening to content creation that's not exactly in my wheelhouse because I want to learn different perspectives. So, you know, hopefully wrestling cards are going to get the respect they deserve. And I want to thank you for talking about wrestling cards on your platform as we jump into talking about content creation. I've always encouraged people to just start. I would like to hear how you started, where you're at, where you're going, how the process has been. And we can just go back and forth on that for a little bit.
Yeah. So I touched on this a little bit already, but I'll recap in that. So I had been watching so many different creators, and I really loved what a lot of people were doing, but it did feel like there wasn't someone who was in my lane of the hobby. I was having trouble finding people that are nobodies in the hobby, right? So I decided, I don't know, why don't I just start making stuff as a way to sort of force myself to start to learn more about the hobby, because it's one thing just to buy the cards and bring them in, but now what, right? So I was really selfishly trying to force myself to grow my own passion in it, force myself to, like, okay, now if I want to talk about this card, I have to go research it, right? I don't know anything about this, so let me really dive in and do some research. So now I know more about this Max Scherzer rookie card. So when I first started, I work in TV. I work in television, you know, more traditional content.
Emmy award-winning, Dundee award-winning.
That's right. One day I'm going to get that Dundee. I promise. One of these days I'm going to get my hands on one. But so since I do that for a living, it made sense to me to try to start with a YouTube channel. So I made like 3 or 4 videos, and I had a blast doing it.
And they're great videos. I will say, I appreciate the videos. I thought the quality was great. I thought the content was great.
Thank you. I really genuinely appreciate that. And I really had a lot of fun with those. But what I quickly found was that with my time frame, with the kids and the job, to sit down and record takes so many hours. Now to edit it the way I want to edit it takes so many hours. And it was just becoming too much work for something that wasn't actually paying me. And I never intend, I don't know if any of these things will ever pay me. I mean, you know, it'd be great if they do, but I don't know if that's ever going to happen. So to put that amount of work into it was starting to feel a little overwhelming after the 3 or 4 videos that I made, to do it the way that I wanted to do it. So I took a step back from that, and my mind still couldn't get off of it. I still really enjoyed doing it. And I still knew that I wanted to use it as a way to dive deeper into the hobby. So the podcast idea came up. I mean, I'd been listening to a bunch of podcasts and I heard a bunch of people who were doing great things and thought to myself, well, maybe I could just take the same idea that I had, maybe just talk about, use my passion and my love and my storytelling and use that to dive in. So then I decided just to try out the podcast, and I realized that recording for 30 minutes to an hour and editing for maybe 90 minutes is so much less than it takes just to record all the segments for the YouTube channel. And I felt like, man, I can do this. Like I can do this every week. You know, I think I've missed 1 or 2 weeks because of vacations or whatever since I started, but this is something I can keep up with and really see where it goes. And then after like the first month of doing it, I had enough positive feedback from friends and family, and even a couple people at work, you know, that it felt like, okay, I'm doing good enough at this that I can continue to learn and grow and see if I can actually get good at it. And then it kind of just continued to grow. I mean, I'm not huge by any stretch of the imagination, but I had somebody criticize me on Twitter once, a complete random stranger. Good. Yeah, it was phenomenal. Yeah. I was like, this is great. Tell me what you hate. I love it.
Yeah.
And that was a big moment, having that first person, complete stranger, you know, tell me what they didn't like about one of my episodes. And it actually spurred a back and forth, a very friendly back and forth. And, you know, I've been following that person on Twitter ever since. That started to really like, wow, people are actually finding this and responding to it one way or another. And it kind of gave me that extra motivation to still want to keep going. And now I'm in the next big step, right? Because I really wanted to branch out. I really want to start talking to people in the hobby, but now I had my first interview guest a couple of weeks back, and that was huge. And I don't know if this is going to come out before or after, but you're going to be on my podcast as well, my second guest. And I am pumped for when we record that, or pumped that we already recorded it, depending on
whatever it is. Yeah.
So having this next sort of like evolution of being a content creator is another thing that feels like, wow, I have my own little lane that I'm going in, and it's good. It's fun. I really love it. So yeah, that's the quick, long story short, too late, of my content creation.
Is it a fun creative outlet for you? Because YouTube has been a blast for me. Like I despite it taking forever, and despite not necessarily directly getting paid, because I'm not to that, I'm getting close to that 1,000 subscriber mark where we can start getting monetized. Like even a penny a video is worth it to me. Just, I want to get paid. But regardless of that, when I sit down to edit, I find myself like, man, this is why I'm doing this. Like, yes, I like getting the information out, and I like helping people, obviously. And I have received messages, kind of like what you said, that, hey, I started collecting, my son's now into it, your content's changed our life. And I was like,
awesome.
You know, that keeps me going, on top of, while I'm editing, going back to that, hey, this is a fun creative outlet. Like that, it's a like, you know, I don't play music. I'm not very artistic, but I love editing and splicing, you know, like on this one, I'm probably going to try and splice some Michael Scott Dundee award winning things into the, who knows, like, it's just a fun creative thing for me. Are you finding that as well? Or is it more just a information thing for you?
No, you've absolutely hit the nail on the head. I definitely have like a strong urge to want to create. It's a big reason why I got into the television business to begin with. That has allowed me to be creative in so many different ways. But the only part about working in television and doing what I do is I am not I'm behind the scenes. I do camera, I do Steadicam and jib. For those that don't know what it is, go look it up. And
you can find it.
It's pretty cool stuff. Yeah. So I'm more on the technical side, and I love what I do. I really do, but I don't necessarily get to tell the stories that I want to tell.
That makes sense.
So, yeah. So my entire career, which is basically, I'm like 15 years in of working in television, I've still had this extra, like, I still want to do things the way I want to do them, you know?
Right.
So I've always had these urges, and I've dabbled in all different ways to try to create content. I've made goofy short films. I've talked to different friends about starting podcasts about different things in the past, but trying to find that sort of magic sauce about like a topic that I'm passionate enough and educated enough to actually make content about, and finding like at times like people that I want to do it with, or do I just do it solo? All of these different things. This kind of became the lane that kind of checked all the boxes. I love it so much that I know that the passion about collecting isn't going to fade, even though I may be flighty about the specifics. Like, I don't have just a baseball content one like Scotty B Cards, who does amazing on YouTube about baseball cards. I'm in a place where I can float from baseball to wrestling, to Marvel cards, to football, and wherever it kind of takes me, which is great. I don't feel stuck in something or have to, like, if I start to get a little bored with baseball cards, because the Dodgers lose in the playoffs and I don't feel like looking at baseball cards right now. I can then, there's my Bret Hart card, or there's, basketball season's right around the corner. So being able to sort of float through those passions in what I'm doing now allows me to still be creative about it. And that's one of the biggest reasons I missed doing the YouTube channel. And I hope to get back to it at some point, as I was definitely being more goofy and fun and trying to be funny. I don't know if anybody would find it funny, but I was able to be a lot more goofy on that. Trying to do like a John Oliver style sports card show or whatever it was I was going for. I don't even really know. There's less of that in just the podcast, but it's still getting out the creative juices that I have. And it's so much fun to do. Yeah. I still have a blast with it.
What would you say this is kind of my call to action anytime I'm interviewing someone that's also doing any kind of content, whether it's print, audio, video, doesn't matter. What is something that you would advise people? I want people to get out there and start talking about wrestling cards. And some people have done it. We've got Collecting with Caleb, who's focusing on indie stuff now because there's nobody out there talking about independent wrestling cards. And I'm, people like that are finding their niche of different types of things. What's something advice-wise of how to get started and what to learn getting started for anybody that's interested in starting to create any kind of content?
I think the biggest thing is just to do it. Whatever it is you want to do, whether it's YouTube or a podcast, just sit down with your mic and just record an episode. Record 10, 15, however long an episode you want to record, and just get that one done. And then learn from there, because you can sit back and think about it. And really, this is something that I did, as I kind of talked about my journey a little bit. I spent a lot of time constantly talking about, I would like to create content. I enjoy it. It's fun. But what do I do? What do I talk about? Who do I do it with? I've talked to different friends, whatever. So I spend so much time talking about doing it and thinking of all the reasons it doesn't work or that's not going to work, until I finally sat down and did the YouTube channel. I finally said, the hell with it, sat down and just started recording the YouTube channel. And that didn't work, but it at least started to help me figure out what might work. And that led to the podcast version of this content creation. And so far that's working, 3-4 months in, recording every week, it's working. And I probably don't figure that out if I don't just get my butt in the chair and record that first YouTube channel. If I just talk about it and think about it, nothing actually happens until you do it. So for anybody who's interested, just sit down and record something and see what comes out of it.
Well, Shane, thanks for coming on today. Thank you for giving us our time and sharing your journey, where it started, where it is, and where it's going. Let everybody know where they can find you. Again, everything you're going to say is going to be in the show notes, so it'll be easy for people to check you out. But in case somebody's listening to this in the background while they're listing cards or doing whatever it is they're doing, let everybody know where they can find you.
Yeah. So the podcast is called Sports Card Nobody Podcast. You can find it on all the major podcast networks. You can find me on Instagram. That's at Sports Card Nobody. I'm on Twitter as well, at Sport Card Nobody. Sports Card Nobody doesn't fit, so it's Sport Card Nobody. So those are the places you can find me. And anybody who's got 2020 Topps Finest Golds, number to 50 or less, hit me up, because I'm still searching for a bunch of cards.
Okay, I got to do one more question. What is it about Topps Finest that's got you down that rabbit hole?
It's the look, man. It's just such a beautiful card. Let me pull one out because I guess
do it.
This will be on your thing. So let me grab one. All right. So, for anybody who hasn't seen, I'm sure most people who listen and watch your stuff have, but that is just such a gorgeous card.
Yeah.
And I'd seen so many photos of these things for the different sports as well. And it never struck me until I held one in my hand when I said, this is like the prettiest card I've ever seen. I have to have them. And so that just sort of like set off the whole thing. It's like, I love the way they look. I love the checklist. The checklist is really good in 2020. I personally think it's better than 2021. I love the different colors. They all pop so nicely. And again, getting less and less, but they were affordable as well. But the passion for the wrestling cards has actually started to spill over. I've started to try to find 2020 Topps Finest baseball cards, but they're
cool.
a lot harder to find because I want to collect the Dodgers specifically. But once I realized how much I just love the design and the way it pops and the eye appeal when they're sitting on my shelf, I love looking at them. I love the stories that they tell of the wrestlers. It's really started to spill over for me. So I guess that's the long and the short of it.
That's awesome that it's actually a set that's got you chasing things now, as opposed to, a certain sport or a certain player, athlete, whatever. And just for anybody else that's watching that may be able to help you, what exactly are you doing with the set? Are you going for like a master set? Are you just doing certain parallels? What is it that maybe somebody watching could reach out to you and be like, hey, I've got these cards if you'd like to trade or buy or sell?
Yeah. So it's really, I'm looking for the wrestlers that are important to me or the industry. So that's a little bit vague, but like what I'm missing right now is the Triple H, because the Triple H I bought is going to my buddy who won that bet. So I'm missing that. I'm missing Alexa Bliss. I'm missing Becky, Shawn Michaels. I haven't seen a Shawn, and I want them all to be numbered 50 or less. I don't know why. It's just because the golds come in the 50, although it's a weird set because the golds in the extended set come to 50. But in the orange, they're in the regular set, their orange is numbered to 50, but the gold is numbered to 10.
Right.
I don't know why the checklist ended up like that, but whatever. So the golds, so numbered to 50 or less is what I'm looking for. I did have to settle. I may have actually already talked about this here, but I got the 99 Roman because I missed out on the 50 to Roman, 50 numbered to 50 Roman. So I would like to upgrade that Roman. If anybody's out there with a 50 or less, we'll work something out. But so yeah. It's a little bit vague because it's important. It's wrestlers that are important to me or important to the industry. But I'm down to about like maybe 6 or 7 left that I really have to have before I'll be satisfied with the set.
Well, guys, if you got any of those cards, reach out to Shane on social media. Again, links in the show notes to all of that stuff. Shane, thanks for your time. And thank you guys for watching.
Thank you so much, Dan.
Thanks again to Shane for coming on the show. I love what he's doing with his content, his approach to the hobby. And you're really seeing it. I mentioned in the interview, you're seeing a lot of his love and passion for wrestling and wrestling cards coming through to the forefront of his content, in my opinion. And when we can get other platforms that aren't necessarily like this one, where it's mainly wrestling-driven content, when they're talking about wrestling cards, it's a win all the way around. It gets more eyeballs on wrestling cards, and it gets more people thinking, hey, wrestling was a thing I used to like. It's something I currently like, and I'm not buying the cards. Either way, you're looking at that, could get back into the cards. It's a good gateway to get back into them, the more people are talking about them. And again, make sure to follow the Sports Card Nobody podcast. Links below, as I've stated, to Shane's social media, the podcast. And then while you're there, check out all the links to the stuff I'm doing as well. Hit that subscribe button if you haven't already. Give this video a like. And until next time, keep collecting, keep having fun. Click the videos on the screen for even more great wrestling card content. We'll see you next time.